Hello and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast. I'm Danielle Glesney. I'm a dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist. And today we are going to have an episode that is kind of a 2.0 version of a previous episode. So in the past, we got a question about how nutrition impacts mental health. And it was a really great question, and the research is still ongoing. And I just wanted to kind of update you on some of the new things that I've been learning about the tie between nutrition, how we feed our body, and how it impacts our mental health. If you have listened to episode 16, this is the 2.0 version of that. And the question we got was, I know nutrition can play a huge role in many areas of health. And are there any known nutrition recommendations to help mental health? So anxiety or depression is an example she gave us. So this was a really great question. And so if you are someone who is curious about the relationship with nutrition and mental health, or if you struggle or someone you know struggles with anxiety or depression, if you've experienced seasons of high stress, or maybe you simply just want to be in awe of nutrition and how it impacts our body fully, I think it's a really great episode to tune into today, just to be in amazement with, or encouraged to continue to make the really good choices that you're making day in and day out, and how much of an impact it can make. So with that, I just wanted to start off with a quick chart or overview of what impacts mental health in general. So there are biological factors. So if you think of like a chart with three circles and they kind of interlock, there's biological factors that impact mental health. There's psychological factors that impact mental health. And then there's the third circle of social and environmental factors. So we're going to really touch mostly on the biological factors, because nutrition is in that circle, and it kind of interlocks, like I said, with the other circles. But what's really cool to see is that nutrition doesn't just play, one little factor in the biological circle. Nutrition impacts multiple of the factors in the biological circle, if that makes sense. So it makes a huge impact versus just one factor. So, for example, in the biological circle, there's neurochemistry, there's immune and stress response, there's physical health, metabolic disorders, and comorbidity. Okay, so we're just going to talk about how nutrition impacts immune and stress response, how it impacts neurochemistry, how it impacts physical health. And I know that sounds like a lot for one episode, but we're just really going to scratch the surface of these because I am not, a neuroscientist. So I can't go into, extreme depth on any of these things. But we just really are trying to pull out the practical steps that we can take. So first, we're just going to, be in awe of how nutrition impacts mental health. And then second, we'll look into nutrition strategies to boost mental health. So the first one, as I mentioned, the first way nutrition impacts our biology is impacting connections in the brain. So as you've heard us talk about before, you want to always look at the highest level of evidence. So one of those is a systematic review, and a review of 110 studies found. So again, that's the highest level of evidence to establish good practice. Several nutrients and compounds that are important for your neurochemistry. So what those connections are, how your brain, makes communication. So all of these compounds have an anti-inflammatory effect. They inhibit cell death. They affect the cell membrane function, and are important for neuroplasticity. I don't know if any of you have heard of that term, neuroplasticity. It's relatively new to me as well, but it's really how you create new pathways in your brain to make change. So, for example, I was first exposed to that when I was working with my child through just anxiety. And you have, different levels of anxiety, of course, but when your first response in your brain goes down one pathway of worry, you actually need to create a new pathway to be able to, decrease anxiety or worry. So you almost want to think about, the woods and paving a new path. You have to go over that path over and over again for it to be, well worn, and for it to be easier for your brain to go in that direction instead of spiraling in the direction you don't want it to go. So plasticity is allowing your brain to change in function and actually in structure as well. So it's making new communications. So again, these compounds and nutrients are important for also the precision and timing of neural communication, the neuroplasticity, so making new pathways in your brains. So I just think that is pretty amazing to think about the food that you're putting in your body being able to help you make new changes in your brain. And that's going to be important for a lot of areas in your health. So for mental health, like I said, the example of making new pathways to cope with stress or worry, what have you. And so those nutrients, the system in our brain is needed. Nutrients are needed for that. So they're definitely micronutrients or micro elements for proper functioning. Just three of them that you'll be familiar with. The other ones, not so much, but zinc and folic acid and vitamin D are, three of the five that were listed in this systematic review. So I'm not going to really go into that as much because you'll see at the end the practical nutrition strategies. So we won't dive into zinc and folic acid and vitamin D at this time. The next one is how we feed our bodies is important for immune and stress response. So for this, I have three. So in the immune and stress response, you have your antioxidant system, you have immune system and inflammation, and then bacteria in the gut. So I'm going to talk about how all three of those are under this umbrella of immune and stress response. So I learned that the antioxidant system is involved in the development of psychiatric disorders. So it has to do with a reduced ability to cope with stress. So let's just get a little review on the antioxidant system. So I think a lot of people, when we think of antioxidant, we think of those foods that have been advertised as antioxidants, right? Berries. But really is actually a chemical property rather than a nutritional property. So antioxidant by definition is any compound that can counteract unstable molecules called free radicals. And these free radicals can damage DNA, cell membranes, and other parts of the cells. So I'm just going to repeat that. Antioxidant is not a nutritional property. It is a chemical property. And what it does is if a food has an antioxidant, or I'll talk about other forms of antioxidants, if something is an antioxidant, is a compound that can counteract or stop the free radicals from damaging DNA, cell membranes, or other parts of the cells. So your body actually naturally produces some powerful antioxidants. And then secondly, of course, food is a supply of antioxidants such as vitamin C and E. Plant compounds, we've talked about these before. So they're called phytochemicals, which literally means plant chemicals. These have antioxidant properties as well. And then the reason why antioxidants are so important is the free radicals are just an inescapable part of life. So the body generates free radicals in response to environment, such as pollution or tobacco or UV rays. And then also natural processes in the body, the byproduct of the cells can be free radicals. So just natural things that happen in our body can produce free radicals. So we really want, obviously, our body to help produce antioxidants, and then the food that we supply our body to have antioxidants as well. So that's the first one. Second, the immune system. So the immune system, we did an episode on this. I would maybe highly recommend re-listening to that. And it talks about how the immune system works on inflammation, whether it's acute or chronic. So acute inflammation, we talked about how is beneficial. It's something like healing a cut or the common cold or flu. Heals and goes away, and your body knows how to respond later. But chronic inflammation is a low level throughout the whole body, and it's a damaging inflammation. It doesn't really stop, and it's related to chronic conditions such as heart disease. And research is looking into its impact on depression as well. So how inflammation, low levels throughout the whole body, is possibly being linked to depression. So that's an area of future research is needed for that. But anyway, they have discovered that elevated levels of pro-inflammatory proteins is present in depressive, psychotic, and manic states. So that's kind of one of the things that they have discovered and where they need more research. So lastly, the immune system is impacted by bacteria in the gut. So when the bacteria in the gut digest different plant foods, it gives off unique end products, which boost the immune system. So if we kind of sum up the immune and stress response and how that is correlated with nutrition and mental health, we're basically wanting to have a high level of ability to cope with stress. And that would involve, feeding our body foods with antioxidants. That would involve decreasing chronic inflammation. And that would involve feeding our gut a variety of foods so that the bacteria can give the variety of end products to boost the immune system. So those are three, parts under that biological factor. And the next one, we did talk about it briefly in our first episode, but just it's one of my favorite ways that nutrition impacts mental health is the gut and brain axis. And this is really, really fascinating stuff. And it was discovered 20 years ago with what's called hepatic encephalopathy. So hepatic encephalopathy is when you have an altered level of consciousness due to liver damage. I was able to see some of these patients in the hospital when I worked inpatient many, many years ago. But what the treatment they found was when they fed the gut some antibiotics, which was killing off the bad bacteria, it was able to improve the brain function or the level of consciousness in these patients. So that is kind of one of the first examples of the gut and brain axis communication. Another example is what's called dyssymbiosis. I can never say that right, but it involves the disruption or imbalance in the microbial bacteria, or that microbiome is just like the collection of good bacteria in your gut. When there's a disruption in that balance, it's common in functional gastrointestinal disorders. So when you have a functional GI disorder, you have, possibly an imbalance in the microbiome, and this is highly associated with mood disorders. So that is another example of how the gut and brain communicate. So the American Gut Project is something that we've talked about before, and how they're leading researchers studying how the gut flourishes. And they recommend 30 different plant foods per week. And again, that variety, as we just mentioned, is important for boosting immune function. So the variety in your fiber-rich plant foods is allowing your good bacteria in the gut to flourish. I think of it like a garden, and it needs multiple different nutrients to flourish. So the more diverse bacteria in your gut, the better. And so that is another way that our food impacts our mental health and how they communicate. They can affect each other on a cellular level. So the brain influences functions in the gut, such as immune cells and the epithelia cells, which is how your body absorbs nutrients. Another pathway of communication is the intestine communicating with the vagal sensory nerves and the spinal neurons. And that goes to the hypothalamus or the limbic system, which is responsible for regulating emotions. So really cool stuff. Lots of research, I'm sure, coming our way on that as well. But we can already see all these different pathways in which the gut and the brain communicate. And when there's disruption, as in those two examples, how it does not go so well. So another one is the nutrition and mental health connection is physical health. So there's a lot of ways that obesity has impacted mental health. So people with depression are more likely to experience obesity, and people with obesity are more likely to experience depression. And it is not that simple. So there's lots of things, not simply that if you're depressed, you eat more. That's not what I'm saying at all. There's many factors that affect both mental illness and obesity. So we mentioned inflammation. There's coping behaviors or ability to tolerate stress. There's neurotransmitter levels. And many more. So it is a very complex issue that goes beyond simply consuming excess food. So insufficient nutrition can contribute to inflammation, which may lead to depression, or inadequate nutrition can influence neurotransmitter levels, which affects several body functions such as thoughts and memories, learning, emotions, stress response, and others. So as we all know, one does not need to be overweight or obese to have a poor diet or inadequate intake of nutrients. So physical health goes beyond obesity for sure. So I'm just mentioning, some things in the studies that I've been reading. And that is the last of the biological factors that I wanted to talk about today on how nutrition and mental health are connected. So now we're into our key takeaways. And the key takeaways I have for you today is one, just nutrition makes a huge difference. So it is really important, the foods that you're putting into your body, and it is really important, the meals that you're making for your family and what your children are eating, because even at a young age, these things are happening. Your child has to respond for immune and stress response. Your child, body works the same way as far as the gut and brain communication and making new pathways in the brain to cope with stress or anxiety. So our children are just the same as us, that the nutrition or the foods that they eat makes a big difference. So that's to encourage you. That's not to make you feel guilty or shame. That is just to simply encourage you that to keep up the good work and to seek health to seek help if you are struggling in this area. Don't be afraid to reach out. No one is typically offered nutrition classes, and then also no one's offered nutrition classes to really help the family. I think that is a huge area in need of improvement in our culture. Just, when you have a baby, you're told how to keep it alive. And, we just need to know how to help the baby or the child flourish. And so it's very different as they grow. Obviously, they won't take everything. They have to be motivated to eat these foods. So there's an extra layers of difficulty as your child grows sometimes. But even as adults, we know, the right things probably most of the time, but making changes. We just, had an episode on how to how to establish habits, and goals are great, but you need systems in place to make it happen. So one, this is just to encourage you that nutrition makes a huge difference, and it's pretty fascinating and amazing stuff. And two, get some help if you need it, and don't feel ashamed of that, because the culture that we're in, the water that we're swimming in, is not designed for good health in nutrition. So get help. And then the second thing, key takeaway, is variety in our whole nutrient dense foods. So I am sure you've heard me say variety. It's because it is so important. So the thing is we always want a quick fix, right? We want to just go to the supplement store, grab what we need, or even just get a multivitamin, cover our bases. But one, supplements fall short. And two, if you do choose the food, so say you're like, okay, I need vitamin D. What foods have vitamin D? That's a horrible example because there's very few food sources that have vitamin D. Let's just say folic acid. Okay, what foods have folic acid? I need to eat more of those foods. That's going to maybe help a little bit, right? You're going to be choosing some nutrient dense foods, but what did we talk about most is the variety that matters. So if you think about, this was a really great question in a conversation I had with a friend, and she's like, well, I'm eating this nutrient dense food, so but we're just sticking with the same ones. Well, the thing is yeah, you could be eating like chicken and broccoli and rice, consistently, and those are good nutrient dense foods, right? They have high fiber in the broccoli, you have high fiber in the brown rice, you have some carbohydrates in the brown rice, and then of course you have protein. So there's nothing wrong with that, but each food has a specific package. Okay. So it has specific vitamins, specific minerals, specific plant compounds, phytochemicals, or what have you. So you will miss out if you're only having broccoli, or if you're only having chicken. You're going to miss out on all the compounds and vitamins and minerals in all the other sources. So just think of it that way, that you need, the whole spectrum of vegetables and as many fruits as you possibly can enjoy, and grains and starches. And that's why I talk about cooking so much, because in order to eat those, you have to cook a variety of things, and practice is needed in cooking to enjoy a variety of foods. So if you need more guidance on what nutrient dense foods are, definitely go to our website. We have what's called the 4 pillars, and it's just 4 general topics and how you can use that as a framework to get these nutrient dense foods most often in your diet. And again, this is not a diet. We are against diets because that is very restrictive. We want to pursue nutrition in a positive way. And the Mediterranean lifestyle is one that, if you want some more specific guidelines than what's available on our website, you can look into that, dietary patterns of the Mediterranean. We even did an episode on that as well. And it's really fascinating because The Mediterranean diet patterns have reduced markers of inflammation. They have really low incidence of many chronic diseases. And it's not just the food, it's the lifestyle of community and physical activity and in a variety of things. But you can check out that podcast that we did on the Mediterranean diet, because it's always ranked year after year as the best, because you're just pursuing those nutrient dense foods. You're not eliminating anything. And I think that's why it's always ranked number one too, is just because people can do it, because we're not eliminating anything. So those are my key takeaways for you today. We want to have variety, and we want to feed our gut well. So again, in that feeding the gut well, there is those probiotics and prebiotics, which I mentioned in that previous episode that we did on this topic. So probiotics are available in yogurt and kefir, for example. So kefir is that probiotic drink. It has about 12 probiotics. And the best yogurt on the market has 6, which is still very good. But make sure your yogurt does have 6 or 5. That's great too. Because then you're actually getting that probiotic benefit. Again, don't head to the supplement store to get probiotics. I highly just recommend getting them from food. And then prebiotics is actually the food that you're feeding that good bacteria. So prebiotics is your fiber-rich foods. So asparagus, garlic, there's just a variety of prebiotics, but just think about lots of fruits and veggies, and you will get them. So I think that is a better understanding, hopefully, of nutrition and mental health. So if you liked our episode today, please share it with a friend, or like us on any of the social media platforms. And thank you to our band Happy Pill for our theme song, Thinkin Bout Food. Have a great day.